Good morning, and welcome to the Comix Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the kids. Woo! And the kids are here. I like it. I like it. See, I told you they had plenty of energy. Okay. Our book this month is Witch Boy by the fantastic Molly Ostertag, who is here live and in person. Let's hear it for her. Yeah. Woo! Yeah. All right. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, no, this was a great book. Everybody loved the book, yeah? Yeah. Okay, there you go. See, that's always the best reaction. Let's start from always the easy question. Okay. Or maybe not easy question, but always a great place to start is why comics? What is it about comics for you that made it the way you wanted to tell stories?
Yeah, I think when I was like your guys' age, I drew a lot and told a lot of stories to my friends and in my head and made up stories. And I kind of just never stopped doing that. I think everyone sort of draws when they're young, and you kind of, at a certain point, you're like, oh, I'm not good at drawing anymore. So you stop, and I kind of just never got that message. So I kept drawing stories and writing stories, and then I kind of realized that I could put them together. But as an artist, what I really love about comics is that you can tell this story and it's visual with pictures, but you can do it all yourself. Like if you wanted to make a movie, or you wanted to make a TV show or an animation of any kind, or a video game, which are all the other kind of ways to tell a story visually, you need a big team of people. I work at Disney as my day job on the show Star versus the Forces of Evil, and we have like 50 people who work on it. And so it's cool because everyone comes together, but it also like I just like comics that you sort of write it and then draw it, and it's all you. So that's what's really exciting to me about them, is that it's really like this book is the first one that I've written and drawn, and it feels like it's just a little part of my heart, because it's just like every single line of it came from my head. Yeah. So that's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah. You've done other books. Mm-hmm. You did Strong Female Protagonist, and you did a book called Shattered.
Shattered Warrior.
Warrior, right? And Shattered Warrior was like a YA book as well, so probably okay for these guys.
A little older than Witch Boy. I think this is like a middle grade book. Shattered Warrior is definitely sort of for teens and up.
Yeah. And so what made you, after working on comics for adults, what made you go, I want to do comics for kids?
I think I'd always wanted to, but I kept getting projects with writers where they were sort of writing these adult or teen scripts. And then at a certain point, I just really sort of got the courage to write my own stories, which takes a little bit of, I think it took a bit of confidence that it took a while for me to get. But all my favorite books that I read, and I still read a lot of books, but everything that I read that affected me the most was before I was like 18 years old. And like books that really taught me how to be a person and gave me like ideas and things that I'm excited about, and kind of like ideas that just really have stuck with me my whole life. Those all were things that I read when I was pretty young. Yeah. So I really wanted to kind of make a book with some like ideas and themes and morals that are important to me, and kind of give it to people who might need it. There's like definitely some themes of like gender nonconformity in the book that I think like there's a lot of kids now who are like exploring that, and I wanted to make a book that made especially young people feel really good about themselves. Yeah,
no, and I can't think of anybody else who's doing anything like that in comics.
It's definitely, there's themes like that are often sort of restricted to adult comics and adult media, and so I wanted to kind of make something kind of safe that explored it without being too intense for kids. And also, I mean, I love like fantasy and magic, and I got to draw a cool wolf dragon and some cool spells, and like that's my favorite stuff to draw. And yeah.
So were you a Harry Potter reader?
Oh yeah, Harry Potter is so big for me. Yeah, that's like probably the most formative book in my life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of world building that you did before you started drawing? In terms of what this society is like, and like how much work did you do ahead of time?
I did some, but I think I personally, with fantasy, I really like when it doesn't give you a whole big exposition at the beginning. And I sort of like when it just gives you as much as you need to know. And then maybe there's implied other parts of the world, implied other kinds of magic. I'm exploring it more. There's a sequel coming out, and I'm working on the third book. I'm writing the third book right now. and just trying to figure out like more about the world and expand it a little bit. But for this book, I really didn't devote a lot of my energy to developing the world. I kind of wanted to make sure that I had like the plot down and feelings and the characters, and those were the most important. And then the world and the magic kind of served those. So yeah, like I used to be like I mean, I still am a big like Lord of the Rings fan.
Sure.
Like my dad read them to me when I was like 8, and I was obsessed with the movies. But that kind of fantasy where it's really heavy on history and you have to like, you know, learn Elvish to like which I did, like you have to like do all this stuff to really understand the story. That's a little I don't know, that's not the kind of stories I want to make. I want to make ones that are kind of accessible.
Sure. Let's maybe talk a little about process now. Where do you, when you embark on a project like this, what's your starting point? What's the first thing that you do? Did you start doing sketches of the characters? Did you start writing? How did it work for you?
Yeah, I actually have a little presentation for that we could do.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely
talk for a second while George.
Yeah. When I came up with it, the very first spark of the idea was that I was thinking about the books that I really loved as a kid, which were like the Tamara Pierce Lioness books are really good. I don't know if anyone's read them, but they're about a girl who in a fantasy world who disguises herself as a boy to be a knight. And she's kind of like spends like the first 2 books in disguise as a boy. And those really appealed to me. And I'm like kind of a tomboy in a lot of ways. And so I really like that idea, but I wanted to make something that went the other way, that it was like a boy trying to do a girl thing kind of, because I had a lot of books that were about girls trying to do boy things. And I just wanted to flip it, I guess. So that was like the very start of the idea. And then I was like playing around with a lot of different stories. And as I said, like not very confident about my writing skills. But then at a certain point, I'd drawn Aster, the main character, enough and like had a sense of him that I just kept like having dreams about him. And he was very real to me. So I really knew that I had to kind of stick with him.
Cool. We're up with.
Yeah. So that's just the cover. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. So those are like some really early images of the kids. I think those are in the back of the book too. Where I was just sort of trying to figure out like what they looked like. And what I like about comics is that there's something really, when I draw the characters, I feel like they become a lot more real to me. And so I always can kind of, if I'm trying to figure out like what would be in character for them to do, I sort of can be like, can I see them doing that? Would I draw them doing that? Let's see what's next. Oh yeah, that's his parents. Yeah, let's see what's next. Okay, so this is one of the very first images I drew from the book, which like you can see, it's similar to a scene. A few details are different and Aster looks a little different. Because I didn't know the script quite. I didn't quite know what the plot was going to be yet, but I wanted to kind of get that feeling. I knew I wanted it to be a fantasy and to take place in the woods, but I also knew I wanted it to be set in the modern day. And I knew I wanted there to be this like scary monster who maybe is like one of his friends who was turned into a monster. So that was kind of like, before I'd really written the script at all, I sort of drew that image, and that was like just a way of anchoring like what I wanted the book to look like. What's the next one? Oh yeah, that's just my office. I live in Los Angeles, and that's my little home office. I draw on this, which is called a Cintiq. So I draw everything digitally. You can draw right on the screen. And I really like drawing digitally because it lets you work a little bit faster. I used to work on paper with ink, and every day I would spill ink on my clothes or on the floor, and it would make a big mess, and like it would take a long time to draw comics. And so a couple of years ago, I switched to doing everything digitally. Yeah, what's next? Okay, so this is sort of the process. When I write my script, it's really simple. Like this is a script, 2 pages, and it's really just like a little bit of dialogue and a description of what's happening on the page. Because I'm writing for myself, I can kind of write, like, I don't have to put a lot of detail in because I trust myself to figure it out later. But yeah, like the first step, once I'd kind of brainstormed and gotten an idea for the characters and the story, was just to write out the entire script and write out like what everyone says and what like everything that happens visually.
Did you have a question in the front?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I noticed it says 36 and 37. That's the pages. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So that's that. And you can see it's like, yeah, those pages are pretty simple. I don't even have any description for what happens on page 37 because I sort of was just like, I'll figure it out. So can you go to the next slide? So this is the next step for me. It's called thumbnailing, where I just do really, really, really sketchy versions of the page. And so like you can see, yeah, it's just like incredibly simple. Sometimes it changes, but it's sort of just me figuring out the pacing of the book. So like how many pages do I need to tell this story? Next slide.
And you're doing that digitally as well?
Yes. Yeah. But a very small, like I on the screen, it's about this big. Because I want to really not get focused on the drawing. It's all about the composition. So then I go from thumbnailing to this stage, which if I was doing it traditionally, it would be called inking, but it's just all on the computer. But this is where I sort of do the final lines, and this is where I have to know, exactly what the characters look like, and exactly what the house looks like, and everything. Yeah, but it's sort of just that's drawing everything out, and this is the longest stage by far. Like inking all the pages takes a really long time. Next slide. And then I add color. And I really love coloring because it's sort of the moment where you go from this black and white thing that kind of feels patchy and like it's not all together, and then you color it and it becomes like the final book. And I feel like it makes the characters really come alive. So like for this scene, I knew that I wanted it to be a little bit spooky because they're going to go into this forest. But it's also kind of like they're sort of gathered around the fire, which is this safe place. So I gave it like these sort of spooky, dark colors, but they're gathered around this warm fire while Topher is talking to them. Yeah, so coloring is fun. It kind of really makes it all, just finishes it. I think that's everything on my process. Yeah.
So
Yep,
when you
that's how I do it.
when you do your coloring, are you doing that all at once after you've inked the whole book? Or
Pretty much, yeah. I kind
of
of like to just, go thumbnail, like write it all, thumbnail it all, ink it all, and then color it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any questions about her art or process? Yeah, please.
So, I noticed in the beginning symbols. Symbols.
Yeah. So in that, I really wanted there to be a magical writing for the, and sort of a magical language for the family to use. And like in Harry Potter, again, one of my favorite books, they sort of say these like fake Latin words as their spells, like Wingardium Leviosa. And I kind of didn't want to come up with like actual words because I wanted it to sort of be a little bit more magical and mysterious and not sound like a language. So because it's a comic, I can kind of just use these like magical runes. So that was the idea. So I think the family, they both can speak the runes or they can write them down. And there's a little bit more about them in the second book too. But yeah.
So I noticed here, see, is it the family?
Yeah. Yeah, he's been sort of cut out of it. Yeah.
Is there a shape?
Yeah.
Do you hear those rune sounds? Do you have a sound from them in your head, or are they just purely a visual?
It's the magic of comics that I don't have to have a sound for them. No, I don't. And it's funny because I was, for a while I was like, oh, should it be Latin or something? Like that's sort of the classic. And then it's like, I mean, they're in America and they're kind of from a lot of different cultures. So any words that I use would kind of reference a culture, and I kind of wanted to just have it be its own thing. Like they've invented these runes as a way to use magic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other questions about her art or process? Oh, right up in front of you.
Why does he have?
So all of the kids in the family have some kind of little thing on a red thread around them, and those are all little protection charms, which again is something I do more in the second book. But oh yeah. They're all kind of like protection charms to stop them from like getting too hurt or getting in trouble. Yeah. Yes.
So how many is this a series, and if so, how many?
There's going to be a second one coming out. Well, this book just came out, so there's a second book coming out this time next year, and I'm working on 2 more. I think I'd like it to be 4 books, but I sort of am writing it right now and trying to figure it out. Yeah.
What's the process like when you're pitching it to Scholastic? How did that come about? I mean, had they seen your other work and asked you if you had other ideas, or did you go to them with the idea?
Yeah, I had contacted them. I had been working with them because I was maybe going to draw the Wings of Fire series. Do you guys know that? Those books, yeah, and those Mike Holmes is drawing them, and there's a coming out. It didn't work out because I kept drawing the dragons too cute, I guess. So I'd sort of known them through that encounter, and then I wrote this book. I wrote the whole script, and I sent my editor at Scholastic like those character designs that I showed you, that concept art, and she eventually had me draw 24 pages sort of as a sample. And then she could use that to pitch it to Scholastic and say, here's what this book will look like. We should get it. And then they did. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been really nice working with them. They're a very, very good publisher.
Yeah, no, they seem like.
Yeah.
Your script is, as you noted, is relatively bare bones. Mm-hmm. How did that work editorially? Did they give you notes at that point? Did they wait until you were turning out pages? Were there any notes at all?
Yeah, not a ton. My editor is pretty hands off. She gave my agent, so an agent is someone who sort of represents you and helps you sell your books. So she gave me some really good notes on the basic script, and then my editor gave me a few more notes, a lot of suggestions of how to make it into more of a Scholastic book. Like when I was pitching it, I didn't really know the difference between young adult and middle grade. Middle grade is like 8 to 11 or 14 or so. Young adult is like, I don't know, 12 and up. So she read it and she was like, this is a middle grade book, and here's a few things you can do to make it more in that genre. So that was helpful. And then she'll sometimes give notes, like if I draw a page and it's sort of something doesn't make sense or it's a little confusing, she's like really helpful for that. Mm-hmm. But they were pretty hands off, which is nice. Mm-hmm. Graphic novels are really different than like monthly comics like this. I think these comics are there's a lot more editorial oversight, and there's a lot more like you're trying to pack a lot into every page. Mm-hmm. And a graphic novel, you can kind of be free to just draw whatever you like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. How long did it take you to do the start to finish?
It took me a while to write it and then a while to sort of sell it. And once I actually sat down to draw it, it took me about 6 months to draw it and color it. I worked myself very hard. I had a very tight deadline. Mm-hmm. And I had just started working at Disney, so I kind of was in a little bit of a hit of work where I didn't see anyone for a while, which I don't recommend, but it worked out.
So that means you were doing a little over a page a day? Is that right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's hard to do that and have a full-time job at the same time.
Yeah, I kind of messed up my arm for a bit. I had to go to physical therapy, but it was okay in the end. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I do kind of like the second book, which is called The Hidden Witch. I inked it all in like about 3 months, which was really fast. That was like 6 or 7 pages a day. Yeah. But it just kind of, I don't know. I sort of liked being just like in that world really intensely. Yeah. And kind of like, if you draw a book too slowly, you sort of forget the beginning by the time you're drawing the middle or drawing the end. And so I really liked just like having this like really intense period of work. And then after I was done, I like went to the mountains and went to a cabin for a weekend and didn't talk to anybody and didn't do anything. So, yeah.
Questions from the audience? Nothing? Come on.
Anyone have any questions about making comics?
Is it easy to draw?
Yeah, you still have to know how to draw. You know, like the computer won't draw for you. You can do. Like I said, I'm drawing really quickly, and I like it because you can do Control-Z, so you can undo anything that you've drawn. So if you make a big mistake, you can fix it. You can also kind of like, you can just play around a lot. Like composition, which is sort of how things are laid out on the page, is really important. And you can sort of be like, okay, I have the character here, and then you're like, actually, I think it'd be better if he was like this tall. Like that would be a better composition, and you can do that really easily. You can sort of play with it in a way that if you were sketching, you wouldn't be able to as much. And also with color, I can kind of put down all the colors. And then if I'm like, they don't look quite right, or maybe they need to be brighter or darker, or maybe everything needs to be more green tinted, I can do that really easily. So for me, I think it made me a much better artist because I could kind of experiment a lot more. Yeah. Yes.
So the first time I saw these swords, I thought, it looks like a lightsaber. Is there any?
I just like the idea of like a sword that you could summon. I actually kind of got the idea from this video game Dragon Age. I don't know if anyone's played that game, but I was like, my character would have she had like a sword hilt, but then she could summon a big sword out of it. And so I kind of stole that idea.
And also, when Aster was trying to get back to his world, he used like the dagger thing to like make a portal back to his world. Like, I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that it's definitely, like I said, I don't do a lot of world building, so I maybe didn't explain it very much, but I was thinking that the sword was kind of something that you could use to like attack and fight, and the dagger is more like it can cut kind of magical things, so it can cut through this barrier between this world of magic that they're in, that's all red, and then the normal world. So yeah.
There's an adult all the way in the back that we'll call on.
Yeah, I use Photoshop, and I draw on a Cintiq, which is connected to a computer. Yeah, and then I use like, you can get really nice brushes that are kind of like the book. I think it like has like a little bit of like a sort of soft, like gritty line, and that's what it's like a special brush.
Now, from the picture of your office, it looked like the Cintiq was up. So you're drawing
here?
Yeah.
You just sit and draw like this.
Okay.
It's really nice. It's really intuitive. We use it at Disney too. They're just like the best way to draw on the computer. Yeah. Yes. Favorite comic? I like a lot. The one that I think is really inspirational is That One Summer by Jillian Tamaki, which is like, that's a book that kind of is like a young adult book, but it deals with some pretty big themes, and it's really beautifully drawn. And kind of reading that, I was like, I can make a young adult book. It doesn't have to have like, I don't know, a lot of like big jokes or like flashy things. It can also just be sort of about like feelings and like nature. So that's my favorite. Yeah.
Did you read a lot of comics growing up?
I didn't.
Oh.
I did not at all. Just the newspaper comics. I think the first ones I read was The Sandman by Neil Gaiman in high school.
Right.
And that was when I kind of, because I'd had this idea that comics were just superheroes. And so I was like, I don't know, that's not for me. Like, that's not like, I don't feel very like those comics are meant for me at all. So I wasn't interested in them. And then The Sandman was the first one where I was like, oh, it can be about like, it could be a fantasy comic. It could be this sort of surreal, weird comic. It could be all these different things. Yeah. Yeah. Saw other hands, but now it's gone down. It's okay.
Did she answer all of your questions?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Have any questions just about life?
About life. Go ahead.
So is this that's like just like tell? Because it kind of looks like.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
Also, and also, I noticed that symbol. I've seen this.
Really?
I've seen that in
Oh.
other places.
Well, let me know if you know what it is. All of them I kind of made up, but there's only so many kinds of symbols in the world. So yeah.
Now, are you finding as you get into the later books that you're having to keep going back and looking at what you did?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I didn't draw it that way. I drew it this way.
Yeah, I actually, the first book and the second book, I had really strong ideas for what the story was. And then the third book, I have a bunch of ideas, but I'm trying to gather them together. And so I had to go back and make a list of like, here's all the magic that they've used. And like, here's just like a big list of like everything that can happen. Cause I remember also like, again, Harry Potter, like in Harry Potter, there's so many spells that she introduces. And then later you're like, why didn't you use that spell? Like, you know how to do this thing. Why didn't you do it in this moment when you needed it? And so I wanted to kind of try to like have a really good running tally of like all the magic that they can do. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you have a, I thought you were
Yeah.
So you said you've already started inking book 2. Are you done with it already, or no?
I'm coloring it
You're
now.
coloring it, okay.
Yeah, but it's all drawn. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about it. I
Yeah.
think it's a good book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it expand the themes here?
Yeah, it explores some new themes. It explores more of the world of magic and more also with Charlie, Aster's friends. The very basic premise is that Charlie is mysteriously knows where this curse has come from. And so as Aster is like taking classes and trying to become a witch finally, they also have to find out where this curse has come from. Yeah.
So let me ask you guys a question, because one of the main themes of the book is that Aster is doing what's considered woman stuff, which is really rare in not just in comics but in kind of pop culture.
Yeah.
It's usually, as you noted earlier, the other way around.
Yeah.
Girls trying to do what a boy did.
Yeah.
What was your guys' reaction to that? Did that seem unusual to you? Did that seem cool to you?
That's good. I'm glad.
But it also felt like the shapeshifting and witchery are like the same.
Do you guys all agree as well that it didn't seem unusual at all? Oh, awesome! I just wondering, because you never know how something's going to be taken.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely exploring ideas that I think are like relevant in the real world, but I also know that I'm sort of setting up this like fantasy thing where there's no big reason why all girls are witches and all boys are shapeshifters. So it's kind of like, I think it's easy to be like, yeah, of course you should be a witch. Yeah. But it's a book that I hope matters to some kids who maybe find themselves in the real world wanting to do something that is like they're not supposed to do as their gender. Yeah. So you guys live in San Francisco, which is a good city for that.
This is true. Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
It's possible there might be a different reaction in Alabama or something.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything like review wise?
It's been good so far. The book's only been out for a week and a half. I got one bad review on Amazon where someone said it's about teaching witchcraft and witchcraft is evil. Right. And so that was exciting. Yeah. So yeah.
We actually have several schools that participate in this, and one of them that was not here in San Francisco actually said, "Can we change the book because it was about witchcraft?"
Darn.
And I was like, "Sure, you
crazy.
can," but yeah.
Yeah, I sort of didn't expect that, but I think I'm just I live in my own bubble where I'm like, witches are very, just a very classic part of fantasy. Sure. It's not very challenging, but I guess some people are challenged by that.
They are.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. Exactly. If you have a problem with Harry Potter, then you're going to have a problem.
I remember going to midnight openings, midnight releases for Harry Potter books, and I lived in kind of a small town in the country, and people would drive by and like honk and yell at us because they were mad that we were lining up to get a book about witches and wizards.
That's no good.
It made me feel like a punk, though. I was sort of like, I'm very cool. Like I'm such a rebel reading Harry Potter. So
when did you know that you wanted to be an author?
I kind of always did. Yeah, I very much always did. My grandfather was a literary agent who is a pretty big literary agent in New York. And so I kind of, there was like sometimes be like famous authors at his birthdays and things. So we were a little bit of like, I was aware that was a real job that you could really have. So yeah. Yeah. And I just love books so much. It was really a fantasy to make my own stories.
Yeah. Well, and you said earlier that you were a little nervous at first because you hadn't written anything this long. At what point did that nervousness start to go away, or did it?
Yeah, I'll let you know when it's gone.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it sort of stays around, and I think it's okay to be a little. I think stories are really powerful, and so you want to be smart about them, and you want to be kind of responsible. And so I hold myself to a high standard in that way, which can be nerve-wracking sometimes. But I think it's taken writing this second book to feel more comfortable. And another thing I do that's unrelated to comics, but related to stories is that I run a Dungeons and Dragons game. And I've been doing that for about a year and a half with my friends. And because I really wanted to play and no one wanted to run the game. And so I don't know if you guys know D&D, but it's like you sit down at a table, everyone controls a character, and then the person who runs it controls the story and says, where you go and what monsters you fight, and you just tell this big fantasy story. And you
use your imagination.
Yeah, use your imagination and a few rules. And that was like really scary for me to kind of be like, I'm gonna sit in front of my friends who are very smart and clever and try to, outwit them and try to tell them this fantasy story and like really, like give them this adventure experience. And doing it more and more has made me more confident. like talking about my own stories, and made me more confident that I can like come up with things quickly, and that my ideas are like good. And so it's been fun.
And doing anything creative is like a muscle, like anything else, right? You just have to practice and practice and practice, and eventually you get stronger. So, you know, if any of you guys are thinking about doing comics, keep practicing. Keep doing it.
Yeah, and I think like you find people who will talk with you about them too. Like talking about stories is kind of the best way to get better at writing them, and like watching things and then watching and reading and then thinking, did I like this? Why did I like it? Or did I dislike it? Why did I dislike it? Those are like sort of the way to transition from being someone who just enjoys stuff to someone who also makes stuff. Yeah.
But did you go to school to learn to draw? Yeah,
I went to the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Yeah, which is pretty good. It's weird to go to art school always. Yeah.
Was your training for art specifically, or for animation?
It was for comics, actually. SVA started as a comics and illustration school, and it used to kind of be like when Marvel and DC comics were just like all drawn by like young dudes who kind of like, they just get right out of school and go right to Marvel and DC. That was like a school that they went to. So it has a comics program. It was kind of, I wish I learned a lot about how to draw and how to tell a comic story. I wish I learned more about how to write. Like when I sat down to write a long form book, that was really new to me and took a really long time to figure out how to do. But yeah, it was cool.
Now, when
it was good.
This has to have been 5-6 years ago in school? I'm guessing.
No, yeah, three years ago.
Okay.
Was when I graduated. Okay. Yeah.
So there was already a fairly established graphic.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it was cool. I was in New York City where there's a lot of publishing. So like First Second is there, Scholastic is there. So we kind of had an idea that there were, like, we would go to conventions and like editors from those publishers would be there to sort of see the work that we were doing. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Did you ever have any thought of doing serialized monthly comics?
I mean, I do my webcomic, Strong Female Protagonist, which is ongoing, and we put out 2 pages a week. That's about as much. I'm just not really, I never like read monthly comics, and I kind of, the 22 or 24 page format, I don't think you can fit a lot in. So I'm like really a book person and a novel person. So I love kind of a slightly longer story you can tell the book.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think, you know, for some people at least, it's the difference between, you know, say writing novels and writing short stories.
Yeah.
You know? And in a lot of ways, writing short stories is harder because you don't have the space.
Yeah.
You know, you have to kind of hone it down to what, like the narrow as your idea can be.
Yeah.
You know? The thing I like about serialization is that you can add up to something much bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly Sandman would be an excellent example of that.
Yeah.
Where each story was 22 pages.
Yeah.
Gave you a complete thought, but then you put them together and it becomes something, you know, even bigger than that,
definitely.
You know?
Yeah, it's very cool. I love the idea of having this be a series and having like 4 books.
Yeah.
That's like that's a good amount of story. That's like this much pages. Yeah.
So you said you work at Disney day job animating. Is that, I mean, if you could, if money was no object, would you be doing comics full time? Would you be doing animation, or would you keep a balance like you do now?
That's kind of a question I'm asking myself a lot. I did do comics full time for a few years after I graduated, and like, this is like boring to talk about, but just like the money situation is really difficult. And so it's hard to kind of, it turns out that if you're broke all the time, it's really hard to make good work because you're stressed out. And so I really like having this day job because it allows me to really just make whatever kind of comics I want. But yeah, I do. I just had, I like took a month off of work to work on the sequel to the Witch Boy. And it was really nice to just be at home, like drawing all day, talking to my cats. But we'll see.
And they were just great with you taking a month off to
animation kind of works like that. Yeah. There's in between seasons, you usually get a little break.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you just timed it right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
It was nice.
So why do you put these black pages in the book mixed with the white?
Yeah. Well, if you look, you'll see that I think most of the black pages. Yes. Yeah. So I really just wanted to give the feeling of, you know, you're at night, and even if you're inside a house that's all lit up, you look out the windows and it's dark outside. Or if you're in the forest and the moonlight is shining through, it's still just dark all around you. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of make the reader really feel like we're there. Yeah. I also think it just kind of breaks up the book. What I like about, color and having a full color comic is that you can flip through and kind of the scenes all have different colors. So like my favorite parts are like the parts in Mikassi's cave, which are all red, and like every single color is red. And really know like that is like a very distinct scene. Yeah.
It's funny because I read the book in black and white.
Oh,
because the book hadn't been done yet.
Yeah.
So we got the advanced copy and it was in black and white. I didn't know those scenes were red until
a lot of people got those advanced copies that were black and white, and I'm glad that people got to read it early. But the color is really important to me, actually.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
You did your own lettering, obviously.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's actually a fonts that someone made for me out of my own handwriting.
Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't. That would add a lot of time to do my own lettering. Yeah. I had a few questions. Yeah. Well, in the book, that's kind of what Mikassi does. Mikassi is a witch, but he figures out these ways to sort of make himself shapeshift, but it kind of goes wrong. So in general, their magic is pretty divided. The witches do one thing, shapeshifters do another thing. Yeah.
Does he enter the house right?
He's coming.
Obviously, can't. He's trying to harm someone.
Yeah, he's following them through the portal that Aster made. Yeah.
Anyone else? You guys who haven't said anything. Yes, in the back.
Thanks. It's cool. Yeah, I'm not sure if they're relative. I don't know. I mean, Raina Telgemeier wasn't that old when she started drawing Babysitters Club. But yeah, I just turned 26. My birthday was the same as the book birthday. It was very exciting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a really good weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think comics are like, there's just like a lot of really exciting young talent right now, especially because the internet has allowed people to really, you can make webcomics and like share your story really directly with people. So a lot of people, like I started my webcomic when I was 19 and I was in college, and there's just a lot of like, there's a big audience for just like these people's like homemade comics. So yeah. Well, I had tested to be in another book series with them. And I have an agent, so she was kind of putting my name out. But yeah, when I wrote this book, we tried selling it. Well, we sold it. We were sort of bidding between Scholastic for Second and Boom Studios and Oni Press, I think. And Scholastic was the one where I just really liked what they do with graphic novels. Yeah. What? Ostertag? That's my last name.
That's an O. That's not a.
Oh.
Yeah. She did a fancy.
That's
O there.
funny. Yeah. I was trying to make the font look a little bit like magical runes. Yeah.
You see, you try to be clever.
That's really funny. Darn. We'll never try to be clever again.
So doing a webcomic, it's very direct. You're putting it out there. You're instantly getting gratification and feedback. Is there a way to do that as a career though? I mean, you got lucky in that that IDW put out a book of the material.
Yeah. Well, we collected it all together and did a Kickstarter, and then after the Kickstarter had been fulfilled, IDW reached out to basically distribute it and get it into bookstores. But we still it's sort of a self-published book.
It is, okay.
Yeah, it's, some people do it for sure. There's definitely, I think, like, I don't know, there's a lot of big webcomics where they are making a living off of it. A big aspect of that seems to be selling merch, which I just like wasn't super interested in doing. So yeah, that was never, I always kind of wanted to focus much more on telling the stories than on like, I think you can make a living off of a webcomic, but you have to spend a lot of time hustling for that
Right.
and sort of like organizing and sending out packages of t-shirts and
Mhm.
books and everything. And I kind of just really want to sort of just sit at my computer and draw as
Right.
many comics as possible.
Yeah.
So
Makes
yeah.
a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Do you have ideas for other series, other comics?
I do.
Past this, yeah.
Yeah. There's always a lot of ideas.
Mhm.
I think I might like to do a YA next, something a little bit older with teenagers.
Mhm.
Also in a fantasy world. I really like fantasy. I really like magic in the real world. So that's like a place I really like to stay. Yeah, I'm like writing a prose novel that's sort of for fun.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll do something with it eventually.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's fun to sort of always have a couple different things going on.
Sure.
Yeah.
No other last questions from our kids here? Yes, we do.
After college, why was it?
Well, cool hair, by the way. I really imagined that place as kind of like, so something I'm exploring more in later books again is like an idea that there's like a world of magic and a world of humans, and there's sort of like a barrier in between them. So I think Mikasi is in the world of magic and kind of has made this place for himself. This like sort of scary cave area where everything is very like violent and there's bones around, and it's sort of like a dark and scary place to be. And so I just used red. I just decided that red was his color. Red kind of really signals like danger to people when they see it. That's why stop signs are red, fire trucks are red. It really like grabs your attention. So I wanted to, for that final scene, I wanted it to really be very, very dramatic. And I wanted, if you're flipping through the book, I want you to sort of flip past that section and be like, oh, wow, something dangerous is happening here. So that's why. Yes.
How did you get the title?
It's pretty easy. I just thought he's a boy, he's a witch. So yeah. Yeah.
If you were like
Yeah, I was sort of like not pulling on a lot of other fantasy. So I like the idea of witches. This family sort of thinks that witches are all girls. But yeah, I guess there's not really anything that you would call a wizard or a warlock in this world of books. Yeah.
I did like the fact that your world doesn't seem borrowed.
Oh, thank you. That's really nice to say.
I mean, it really does feel like, despite its magic, and that's a
Mhm.
common idea,
Yeah.
it's its own kind. It's not.
Yeah. I tried to I looked at a lot of different like folklore from around the world of like different kinds of magic. And there's a lot of stories about shapeshifters and kind of spirits and magical animals. And there's a lot of stories about witches who are usually women, but not always, who can sort of do things like heal and do magic and do rituals and potions. So that was kind of, I sort of borrowed a lot of ideas without trying to reference any specific
Mhm.
culture. Yeah.
I thought it was good. So for these guys, or for anyone who might be watching at home, who wants to do their own comics, is there a thought
Advice?
or
Yeah.
advice or?
Yeah, I would say just really pay attention to the things that you like. I think that's the most important. For a while, I was trying to draw what I thought other people would want to see. And I think this book is something where I really just did exactly what I like and exactly what I care about and exactly what's exciting to me. And I'm really proud of it. And I think, just like anytime, if it's something that you want to do, if you want to be someone who makes stories, anytime you're, watching your favorite show or reading your favorite book, just pay attention to what makes it good and pay attention to what you like. And you can sort of just take that and just start doing it yourself. Don't be afraid about borrowing. Because like anything that you make will end up being really original. As long as it's something that you just really care about. So yeah.
Something from the heart.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And you should do it. I mean,
yeah.
It's just the best. It's just like, I just love that comics, you can just do it. Like you can just sit at home and do it. It might take you a long time, but like you don't need a lot of money. You don't need other people to help you. You can just do it yourself. And maybe your first one won't be really good, but the next one will be better. And yeah.
I would agree with that too. Draw. It's always
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
Do it. Use your muscles.
yeah,
Well, I want to thank you for coming out
yeah.
and talking to us. I loved Witch Boy. I think you guys all did too. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of yes. Okay.
This is like my first time because it just came out. This is my first time meeting anyone who's like read it, who's not my friend. So
Nice.
thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, nice. Our next month's book for December is Pashmina, and we have the author, and I'm probably going to massacre this, Nidhi Chanani. I actually might have
I
it
think
right.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
you
that
never know
book.
when you
Yeah.
read. Sometimes
We've
you just
been
don't
doing
know.
the like convention circuit together.
Yeah.
That book is so good.
So you're gonna like that book as well. That's the December book, which you can get the first week of December, and she's gonna be here on Sunday, December 17th. So I hope to see all of you back here again then. And again, I want to thank you so much for coming out. I want to thank you for this book, The Witch Boy. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for having me.